And we have a tradition in West Africa in Ramadan. After Asr every day, the scholars will give tafsir in local languages. But their perspectives in some of the West African tafsir that I've heard that I haven't heard anywhere else. So for example, and I gave an example, the Prophet ﷺ on Isra and Mi'raj, Laylatul Isra and Mi'raj, he is taken through the 7 heavens and he meets different prophets on each level of the 7 heavens. If you look at the prophets that he meets, chronologically, the order doesn't make sense. And even in terms of rank, the order doesn't make sense. Or you see Adam on the first level, and then you see Sayyidina Yahya, Sayyidina Isa on the next level, etc. In one of the tafsir sessions I was listening to, Sheikh Ibrahim Niyas was explaining, and they were explaining that he explained that the Prophet ﷺ went on Isra wal Mi'raj at a time in his life that was after the most difficult period of his life. It was after his wife had passed away, his uncle had passed away. He found himself in a very, very difficult position. And so Allah gave him the Isra and Mi'raj to give him glad tidings of what is about to come. Because Allah tells us in the Quran, وَنَقُصَّ عَلَيْكَ مِنْ أَنْبَاءِ الرُّسُلِ مَا نُثَبِّتْ بِهِ فُؤَادَكَ, that He'll tell you the stories of the previous prophets in order to strengthen your heart. That was the message that He gave to the Prophet ﷺ. He said so, and he's explaining the tafsir, he said, so the first level he sees Adam, because Adam had to leave his home and find himself in a new place. But in that new place, that was where Allah established him as the Khalifa. He said he left Jannah, which was his home, and then he came to earth. The same way the Prophet ﷺ was about to leave Mecca and go to Medina. He said then, at the next level, he sees Sayyidina Isa and Sayyidina Yahya, because Sayyidina Isa and Sayyidina Yahya were opposed by people. And so the Prophet ﷺ, when he reaches Medina Munawwara, he's going to face a new level of opposition, specifically from Bani Israel, who were the same people who opposed the previous prophets before him, Sayyidina Yahya and Sayyidina Isa. He said then on the next level, he sees Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam. Am I correct? Sayyidina Yusuf? And he sees Sayyidina Yusuf because Sayyidina Yusuf was betrayed by his brothers. He wasn't protected by his brothers. He was put in the difficult situation and sent out of his country because of his brothers. And when he returns and he has authorities and he's reunited with his brothers, he forgives them. The same way the Prophet ﷺ, after leaving Mecca and after facing opposition in Medina, he will return and be reunited with the Quraysh in Mecca, and he'll forgive them. And we see that in the Fath al-Makkah when he says the exact same thing that Yusuf said to his brothers. He said then on the next level, we see him with Sayyidina Idris. Because Sayyidina Idris is the first Nabi to write with a pen. He's the first prophet to write with a pen. And after the Prophet ﷺ establishes his authority, he starts to write to all of the different kings in the world, inviting them to Islam. Then the next level we see is Sayyidina Harun, because Sayyidina Harun was the mahbub of his people. The Sheikh said Sayyidina Musa was more jalal, he was more rigorous, he was more rough. And so the people couldn't interact with him in the same way they could with his younger brother, Sayyidina Harun. Sayyidina Musa was jalal, Sayyidina Harun was jamal. He was open air, he was friendly. And so he became beloved by his nation. The same way the Prophet ﷺ became loved by Jaziratul Arab in the final days of his life, because he united all the tribes, he brought priests. So he sees Musa, because Musa, when they were wandering in the desert, they had to fight, or they had to go to battle with the most powerful tribes at that time. And it's after the Prophet ﷺ takes over Mecca, then he has to go into fighting the Roman Empire and other places. And then in the final level, he sees Sayyidina Ibrahim. And he sees Sayyidina Ibrahim because Sayyidina Ibrahim, as we know, is the one who re-established the house of Allah. He re-established the Kaaba, and the manasik that we follow in going on Hajj and going on Umrah are all to do with the story of Sayyidina Ibrahim and to do with his wife, Sayyidatina Hajar and Sayyidina Ismail. He said, and so before he returns to Allah, after the 7th level, he sees Ibrahim leaning against Baytul Ma'mur, which is a representation of the Kaaba, meaning the final stage of his life is he will finally achieve his goal of going on Hajj, which is his Hajjatul Wada, and then he returns to Allah. He said, so Isra al-Mi'raj was a story preparing the Prophet ﷺ for all of the different stages in his life to come. So he could take strength from the stories of the prophets that came before him. that's something I heard in this tafsir in West Africa that I'm sure is enriching to a lot of us. We can see that story in a different perspective, and that's something that I haven't read in a lot of the other books, which is why one of the Mauritanian shuyukh who came to Senegal for the tafsir of this sheikh, he said, وَكَمْ قَدْ جَاءَكُمْ مِنْهُمْ سُؤَالٌ وَكَمْ قَدْ جَاءَهُمْ مِنْكُمْ جَوَابٌ بِالْمَا فِي الْكُتْبِ قَدْ تَأْتِي وَتَأْتِي بِمَا لَمْ يَأْتِي كَتْبِهِ كِتَابٌ. He said, how many questions have come to us from you and how many answers have come to you from us? He said, you bring us what's in this book and what's in that book, and then you close the books and bring us what we haven't seen in any of the books. And if you know Mauritanians, you know that they've read and memorized all of the books. So, alhamdulillah. Did I answer the question correctly? Or?
I don't know, but it was good.